On the 20th, at about 9 o'clock in the morning, Mercy Lewis, being at John Putnam's house, was suddenly seized with the paroxysms above mentioned. Let us observe the rapidity with which the desired effects were produced. A neighbor, named Samuel Abbey, was sent in all haste to Thomas Putnam's house to bring little Anne to see what was the matter. The distance was about a mile. He found Abigail Williams with Anne and brought the two girls back with him. On the way, they both exclaimed that they saw the apparition of Goody Easty afflicting Mercy Lewis. When they arrived upon the scene, they found Mercy in convulsions, apparently choked and strangled, and catching for each breath as if it were the last. The two girls exclaimed, "There are Goody Easty and John Willard and Mary Whittenridge afflicting poor Mercy Lewis." After this had continued for some time, a messenger was sent up to Captain Jonathan Walcott's to get his daughter, Mary. The distance was 1.5 miles. She arrived about 1 o'clock and immediately cried out that she saw the specter of Mary Easty standing over the patient and tightening a chain about her neck. Presently, a messenger was sent to the house of Dr. Griggs, 3.5 miles distant, to get Elizabeth Hubbard, who upon her arrival immediately saw Goody Easty, as she said, torturing Mercy in a most dreadful manner. Occasionally Mercy would grow tired, but as her convulsions ceased, Elizabeth Hubbard would be seized with fits and would ask the specter why she had brought with her a coffin and a winding sheet. By 8 o'clock in the evening, the room was full of neighbors, who were so impressed by the acting of the girl that some of them were afterward ready to testify that they saw the winding sheet, the coffin, and the devil's autograph book, and heard words uttered by the specter as well as by the girls. About 8 o'clock, 2 messengers were sent to Salem town to apply to Justice Hathorne for a warrant for the arrest of Mary Easty. The distance was 7 miles. Hathorne at once issued the warrant, which bears the date May 20. The constable went with it to the house of Isaac Easty, 9 miles distant, which he seems to have reached about midnight. For 2 days, poor Mary had enjoyed her freedom, the comforts of home, and the pleasure of being once more with her husband and children. Now at midnight she was aroused from sleep, carried off to prison, and put in irons, after which the constable returned 7 miles to John Putnam's house to witness the performances of Mercy Lewis until dawn. Mercy kept screaming, "What? Have you brought me the winding sheet of Goodwife Easty? Well, I had rather go into the winding sheet than set my hand to the book." About daybreak she fell asleep, but only for a short time. Her paroxysms were not finished until Mary Easty had been examined before Hathorne and finally committed to prison early the next morning. Nothing could show more forcibly than the event of that 20th of May the extent to which the community was dominated by the accusing girls. There is no hint that among all the bystanders who watched Mercy Lewis in the course of that day and night, there was one who ventured to express any doubt as to the reality of the pretended apparitions. Indeed, the slightest expression of any such doubt would have been fraught with peril to the doubter, and it is most likely that none but willing believers made bold to attend the scene. It only needed be added that after Mary Easty was finally committed for trial and the news of it reached John Putnam's house, the wretched Mercy Lewis at once recovered, thus sealing the belief in the truth of her story. From that moment, it was a foregone conclusion that Goody Easty must die, slain by the same degrading methods which had achieved the destruction of her sister. Further details of the trial seem unnecessary. It was but the same old story repeated. In all, 19 persons were hanged. 1 died of ill treatment in prison, and the old wretch Tituba was sold into slavery to pay for her board in prison. One often hears people allude to the burning of witches in New England. No persons were ever burned there by white people for witchcraft. One cruel punishment, however, was inflicted on this occasion for the only time in American history. In Old English law, in cases working corruption of blood, the refusal to plead either guilty or not guilty to an indictment would prevent confiscation of estates. Hence a prisoner would sometimes refuse to plead, and in order to overcome his obstinacy, the law would stretch him on the floor and pile weights upon his chest until the breath was gradually squeezed from his body. This was appropriately called the peine forte et dure. Now Giles Corey was arrested for witchcraft in April. His wife, who had been in jail since March, was sentenced to death on September 10, and his own trial came 2 or 3 days later. The knowledge that thoughtless words of his, uttered in jest, had been used against his wife had broken his heart, but not his will of iron. This man, who in all his 80 years had never known the meaning of fear, expected nothing but death, and probably wished for nothing better. But he had made up his mind to leave his property where he pleased, and balk his enemies of at least one gratification. So he stood mute before the court until he was taken out and pressed to death. Nothing could quell that indomitable spirit. 3 days later, on September 22nd, his good wife and 7 companions were taken to the gallows. One of the most busy witch hunters ever since the affair began had been Reverend Nicholas Noyes, pastor of the First Church in Salem town. Such meager pity as his soul found room for was expressed when he pointed to the swinging bodies and exclaimed, "What a sad thing it is to see 8 firebrands of hell hanging there." Some weeks before, this truculent Mr. Noyes had been present at the execution of Sarah Good, and just before she was turned off, he said to her, "You are a witch, and you know you are." The spirited answer of the dying woman is refreshing to read. "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." In strong contrast with this were the dying words of that noble Christian woman, Mary Easty. The humble petition of Mary Easty unto His Excellency Sir William Phipps, and to the honored judge and bench now sitting in the judicature in Salem, and the reverend ministers humbly showeth that, whereas your poor and humble petitioner, being condemned to die, do humbly beg of you to take it in your judicious and pious consideration, that your poor and humble petitioner, knowing my own innocency, blessed be the Lord for it, and seeing plainly the wiles and subtlety of my accusers by myself, cannot but judge charitably of others that are going the same way of myself, if the Lord steps not mightily in. I was confined a whole month upon the same account that I am condemned now for, and then cleared by the afflicted persons, as some of your honors know. And in 2 days' time I was cried out upon by them, and have been confined, and now am condemned to die. The Lord above knows my innocency then, and likewise does now, as at the great day will be known to men and angels. I petition not your honors for my own life, for I know I must die, and my appointed time is set. But the Lord, he knows it is that, if it be possible, no more innocent blood may be shed, which undoubtedly cannot be avoided in the way and course you go in. I question not but your honors do to the utmost of your powers in the discovery and detecting of witchcraft and witches, and would not be guilty of innocent blood for the world. But by my own innocency, I know you are in the wrong way. The Lord, in his infinite mercy, direct you in this great work. If it be his blessed, will that no more innocent blood be shed. I would humbly beg of you that your honors would be pleased to examine these afflicted persons strictly, and keep them apart some time, and likewise to try some of these confessing witches. I, being confident there are several of them has belied themselves and others, as will appear, if not in this world, I am sure in the world to come, whither I am now a-going. I question not, but you will see an alteration of these things. They say myself and others, having made a league with the devil, we cannot confess. I know, and the Lord knows, as will shortly appear, they belie me. And so I question not, but they do others. The Lord above, who is the searcher of all hearts, knows, as I shall answer it at the tribunal seat, that I know not the least thing of witchcraft. Therefore I cannot, I dare not, belie my own soul. I beg your honors not to deny this, my humble petition, from a poor, dying, innocent person. And I question not, but the Lord will give a blessing to your endeavors. The execution of Mary Easty, Martha Corey, and their 6 companions was the last scene in the tragedy. Further trials were held, but there were no more executions, and early in 1693, all the prisoners were set free. As to the cause of this sudden collapse in the frenzy, we may say that it came, as such collapses always come, when humanity has been outraged more than it will bear. Why did the guillotine stop its work in 1794, just after the fall of Robespierre? The men who overthrew him were not much better than himself, but the state of things had come to be unendurable. Such periods of furious excitement inevitably lead up to a moment of reaction, and the suddenness and completeness of the reaction is apt to be proportionate to the intensity and ferocity of the excitement. The reign of terror in Salem Village was due to a temporary destruction of confidence. Everybody became afraid of his neighbors, and there is nothing so pitiless as fear. But many long ages of social discipline, based upon mutual confidence, without which human society could not exist, have made that sentiment so strong and tough that it cannot be suppressed for more than a short time.